Hey guys, it's Tony and we're back on the bench. And this morning we're going to be getting into doing some reassembly here on a Shimano spinning reel. So we're looking at a disassembled Shimano Catana, I believe it is. It says here somewhere, I guess on the spool. Yeah, Shimano Catana 4000HG. All right, so this belongs to my buddy Dan. It's not in too bad a shape, but it did have a couple of problems. We had a fused ball bearing in the side plate. It was really difficult to take out. Lots of sand buildup in some of the parts. We had a shaft, that was kind of swelled up on the main gear shaft, things like that. So we've spent some time cleaning and just getting into all of these parts here, making sure that everything is accounted for the best that we can here. So this is a three ball bearing reel with also a roller bearing as well. So technically you can call that a 4-ball bearing reel. All right, but we're going to start here. We've cleaned up the inner housing here really well, and it's nice and clean, free of all the old grease and debris and stuff. All right, we've got a ball bearing here, a smaller one, all right, that cleaned up quite nicely. It's in good shape. Okay, and we're going to set that back down in there, and we're going to start with a little bit of reel oil around that, and that's going to prevent any rust damage. Okay, and then, we've cleaned up all these parts here, all right? So we've got our pinion gear, all right? We've cleaned it up, cleaned out all the teeth with some WD-40 and a brass wire brush, things of that sort, toothbrushes. We've definitely made some use of some household Q-tips and things like that in this cleaning process. All right, so we're going to take that Penn Precision Blue Grease to the gear teeth, fresh grease there. All right, we've got a ball bearing here. It's in good shape. It spins real nice and smoothly, so there's no problems there. There's no rust damage or anything of that sort. We're just going to take a little bit of reel oil to the top of this here. All right. These bearings, I do believe, are serviceable. So far, I haven't found any need to warrant to, take them apart per se. But I've got those videos on the YouTube site. You can check that out on how to disassemble a serviceable ball bearing, that is. Okay. So we're going to start with this here, and we're going to get this back into position like so. Okay. We're going to start with that. Okay. Now, for our roller bearings, okay, they look like they're in pretty good shape. I don't really see any real problems here. These technically self-lubricate in here, so there's really no need for additional lube. However, the collar here that runs on those, I normally don't mind just putting a light film of grease on this part here just to help prevent any rust damage that may occur over time. Okay, just a light little film of grease goes a long way with that. Okay, and then you should be able to put your collar back into position and then run that back over your pinion gear like so. You have these little notches here that you have to get into position. It sinks down like that. Okay. And then you've got a washer that goes on top. Okay. And that's your assembly. Okay. Now we had 4 screws here, and we're going to take a bead of oil to all those screw threads just to help keep these protected. We've got the 3 longer ones that went in these positions here, and then the shorter one up front here. Okay. And we're going to take a Phillips to all these screws and get those in place. But yeah, this reel actually did turn out to be a little bit more of a project than I anticipated, because outside it looked actually relatively clean. But this is what happens with fishing reels, right? That, they get heavily fished, And, they might get rinsed off on the outside, but on the inside, they might be deteriorating a little bit. So it doesn't hurt every once in a while to, get into, checking out, the innards, if you will, of the reel. And that's what these videos are about, so that you can see how you can service these reels if you have them, or if you're thinking of picking one up, then you can watch the videos and have a reference as to how they can be serviced and worked on. Okay, now, next, we've cleaned up all these pieces and parts here. Our main gear, crosswind gear, main shaft, crosswind block, and then there's a shaft for that piece as well, and then a set screw. We've cleaned up all these teeth. We've taken some 4.0 steel wool to this shaft here. This shaft was kind of swollen, and this ball bearing here was just kind of fused on here. I had to spend a lot of time with some penetrating oil and, just doing some light taps, with a socket, basically, just kind of tapping out that bearing and, getting it loose, from that shaft. Okay, so for all these parts, we want to, inspect the 4.0 steel wool, make sure that we take the 4.0 steel wool to all these surfaces. They're nice and clean now. Okay, so we're going to start simply here with the crosswind gear first. Okay, and we've taken off all the old grease, and we're going to put on some fresh Penn Precision Blue grease here to the gear teeth. And we're going to get underneath it as well. We'll get some more here on the rest of these teeth. It'll work its way in there, but you want to make sure that you have just enough. Okay. And we're going to set that down into position like so. Get that started. Then we've got our crosswind block. Okay, we've cleaned this up here. And we want to take some blue grease under here. Okay, and then we've also got this rod, right, that goes into place. And it won't hurt to put a little grease on this as well, just to get that started. Okay, and then what you need to do is you have to come in from underneath here to start this. It's a little bit of a song and dance here. You got to get this gear lined up just right. Okay, and then you should be able to push the rod up and then get it into place right here. Okay, that's the first part of that. Okay, now we're going to take our main drive shaft here. And, all spinning reels are different. And in a lot of situations, you would need to get the rotor back on. In this case, I don't think that needs to happen necessarily. You just need to make sure that you account for all these pieces here. Now, we're not going to push this all the way down just yet because we need to get this in position. You want to make sure that this is as far down as you can get it so that you can get access to that screw hole down there. Okay, but we've cleaned up the main gear, and we're going to go in with the blue grease here on these gear teeth. Nice big gear teeth on this reel. Okay. Also note there's a couple of shim washers on this side. They're thin, so you just don't want to lose them. Okay. And we're going to get that set into position and meshed up with the pinion gear and the crosswind gear. Okay. Now you're ready to send your main drive line down and get those holes lined up down here at the base. And sometimes you have to tweak it just the tiniest little bit to get it to line up. A little bead of oil here goes a long ways. Yeah, I will say this reel was kind of choked on, some dried up grease and also some salt spray. It had some evidence of salt spray in the handle shaft specifically. Lots of sand in the bail springs and things like that. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay. All right, so we've got that all set up. All right, this is greased up really well. We're just going to put a little bit more in here just for good measure, just to help protect these parts from any future damage. Okay. Okay. So now, obviously we've cleaned up in here. It wasn't that bad to begin with, but that bearing, it was actually rusted on the outer rim of the bearing, and so there's still a little bit of residual rust build up here. And a real easy way to remedy that kind of problem is just you can see all the rust damage that's on the outside of this. This bearing I think is still usable. It's got a little bit of roughness to it, not it's not quite as bad as some others that I've seen. The other ones in here are a little bit better than this one, but I think it's still usable. So one way to remedy future rust is just do a little bead of real oil, and you can also do some here on the housing as well. Okay, and that's going to prevent any future damage to that. Okay. We'll place that back on like so. And then we got to get our side plate back into position. A little snap. Okay, should be good there. All right, and then we've got these screws here that need to go back on. We've got the smaller one that goes down here. Yeah, hopefully all this cleaning work will pay off on this reel and make it so that it's a little bit more future proof, if you will. But one thing to note, anytime you're fishing is, you want to, make note of the elements that you're fishing around, especially when you're shore fishing, the dirt, the sand, things of that sort, things that can really impede the operation of the reel. And, salt water alone, will destroy almost any fishing reel given enough time and exposure. So those are just things that you want to be aware of. And the more exposure a reel gets to those elements, the more maintenance, technically is required. So you want to think about that too. And there's some reels, they claim that they're sealed 100%, in my experience, there's really no reel that's 100% sealed. There's some that are more resistant, to saltwater elements and things like that, but there's no substitute for doing regular maintenance, basically. Okay. All right, so now we're ready to put this plate back into position here, and it's held in with just one screw down here at the base. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just do a little bead of oil there. Remember, one drop of oil in the right place is better than a lot of oil all over the place, basically. Okay, so it'll go a long ways, prevent rust, protect the threads of these screws. Okay. Okay. So now let's talk about the rotor. All right, so this rotor had a lot of sand buildup inside here, basically. So what we've done is we've taken some penetrating oil here and we've spent some time just cleaning this out here, you know, with some WD-40, right, and just kind of exercising this side here, the spring. Okay, and that's cleaned up really nice now. Okay, we've spent some time just kind of cleaning up the housing here in general. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to put this plate back on here. And then we've got this screw that we're going to throw back in. Okay. And we're going to dry this off a little bit. But yeah, a lot of sand gets caught up in these screws here. And, you know, you want to do your best to try to remove as much of that as possible. Okay, because that does bog down that bale fire. Okay, we checked our line roller. It looks like it's in good shape. I've got a separate video on how to do that as well on the YouTube channel on how to service your line rollers. So you can check that out if you need be. It's basically just taking this screw out, okay, and you know, on some reels there's just bushings, some of them have ball bearings in there. You just want to use caution taking it apart, and you want to clean up in there and then just apply a little bead of oil and you're good to go. Okay, so we're going to place our rotor back in place. Before we do that though, speaking of oil, we're going to do a little bead of oil here on that latch underneath. Okay, so we're going to take our rotor nut, reverse threaded, and we're going to spin that up. I'm also just going to take the tiniest little bit of oil to that thread, help keep that intact. And then we said that was a 12 millimeter. Now we're going to spin that up gently. Okay, and then we've got a washer and a set screw here. I'm going to do a little bead of oil there. And then they give you all these holes here to place the screw, and you kind of have to get this in just the right position. I don't think I've ever seen one that has a washer like that, but that's okay. It's just part of the design. But this prevents that screw from turning on its own so that you don't lose your rotor. I'm going to try the other side here perhaps. I don't recall which side it was on. It shouldn't really matter. We're going to set this down in there. These screws are some of the most temperamental screws, as you can tell. Try one last time here. Okay, and that's going to keep that from turning. All right, there's a couple of washers. There's a thicker one that goes on the bottom of this click ratchet, all right, and then the thinner one goes on top. You just want to make sure that you don't lose those parts, and that you account for them when you go to put this all back together. Okay, and now we're going to have a look at our spool. All right, so we've cleaned this up the best that we can. There's a lot of, dirt that, got caught up in their sand and whatnot. All right, and then we've got our drag stack here. Not in too bad a shape. These are the felt type washers mixed with the metal washers here. Pretty typical for, these kinds of reels of this style. Okay, so we've cleaned all these up, and all I like to do here is just take a little bead of reel oil to these washers here, and that'll find its way through there. Okay, and that's all you really need to do. You can put them in dry if you want as well. I don't mind doing just a little bit of oil. That helps keep them intact. Just a light little drop really is all you need to do. A couple of little drops and that's it. Keyed washer. Teflon or metal washer. And then we've got our snap ring that goes back in. Holds all that in place. Okay, so it should look like that. We're going to do a little bead of oil under here. And that's all we need to do there. Put this back into position, like so. Put the top cap back on. All right, and then last but not least, we want to make sure that we clean up these parts really well because they're exposed to a lot of the rigors of saltwater fishing and the sand and the dirt, salt spray and whatnot. Okay, so we just want to clean these parts up really well. And I can see there's quite a bit of it here actually. I want to make sure that that gets exercised right and cleaned up properly. Okay, and then we're going to go back with some 4-0 steel wool real quick. Some old grime on here, some salt grime as I would call it. Made it pretty difficult to take this handle off actually, so we're going to go back with the blue grease, prevent any future damage here. Okay, and then also a little bit of reel oil here at that pivot point. It's not going to hurt anything. And we're going to slide that back in real nicely. All right, we already did a little bead of oil here. Do one more just for good measure. We're going to spin this up. And tighten that up a little bit. I'm just going to dry off some of this WD-40 and oil off the reel here. And we're also going to get a little bit of oil right here as well on that handle knob. Prevent any handle chatter. And we're going to try this out. Yeah, nice smooth operator. That's pretty good. Make sure the bale fires good. Yep, it's firing really really good. Drag, tighten that up. Yep, nice and smooth. Make sure you back it off when you're not using the reel anymore. That prevents any memory buildup of that drag stack. So there you have it. That is the Shimano Catana model 4000HG spinning reel, all serviced and ready to go. And thanks again for watching. This is Tony with Back on the Bench. If you liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please make sure you do subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you will get all the updates as to when there are new videos being posted. And there's going to be quite a few more coming out shortly, so stay tuned for those, and we'll see you next time.